Founded in 1682 by William Penn, Europeans first settled in Pennsylvania in 1637, although several tribes of indigenous people occupied the land for centuries before this. Pivotal in the French and Indian Wars, the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, and the United States Civil War, it is no surprise that with such a rich history, our state has developed a culture that is distinctive and multifaceted. Full of legends and real-life heroes who risked everything for their beliefs, today Pennsylvania retains strong elements of folk culture developed by a combination of ideologies practiced by the varied ethnicities of original settlers, Native Americans, and shared experiences. Legends and lore passed down over centuries reveal philosophies that are as superstitious as they are religious and even scientific, resulting in a microculture found nowhere else. You are listening to Pennsylvania Life, Legends, and Lore, where we believe that behind every great story, there is a nugget of truth. In each episode, your hosts, Ethan and Holly, will attempt to uncover that truth and preserve a part of our incredible Pennsylvanian lifestyle.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pennsylvania Life, Legends, and Lore. As always, it's Holly here.
And Ethan.
And we have for you today episode 4 of our Dents Run series, I guess. I don't think we were expecting to have this many episodes, but the story just kind of got a life of its own after we started telling it. So something exciting that we have for you guys today is an interview that we did with Finders Keepers. So we had Dennis and his son Kem on, and then we also had historian Warren join us and kind of get their interpretation actually being there for the dig. So we hope you guys enjoy our interview with them. So if it does sound a little bit different, that's because we had them on with the phone, and hope you guys enjoy. So we have Dennis and we have Kem here from Finders Keepers. They are the ones, in the midst of all of this and figure out, the things that we have relayed to you that, in there we relayed to you accurately, things that we got wrong, but we're going to let them take it away. And you guys, if you just want to let us know, give us a little intro about yourselves and how you came to, being a part of Finders Keepers, and then we can jump right in.
Thanks for having us on the show in the first place. We've been through a lot in the last 8 years with the FBI, DCNR, and everybody, the courts, federal courts, and everything. A lot of people wonder why we actually called in the FBI, and that was actually the only way to go in something like this. That's a huge amount of gold. It's not something we were capable of digging out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt that was to get a finder's fee and let it be properly done. We decided to go with the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think we got ripped off. That's not 100% true in nature. By calling the FBI was probably the best thing we've ever did, because a lot more has come out of this since then. Oh my God, we got a lot more sites. The history of the gold, where it came from, has all come to light. We know a lot more than we did then. Back then, we were just like, I felt like an amateur when I called the FBI, and since then, we've been more like an expert. I knew nothing about the KGC, nothing, until Warren Getler got in with us, and he's the one that connected us with the FBI. Since then, we found out the true story of what Dents Run was about. It was a military supply depot for the Confederate Army. We only thought there were 52 bars of gold. We didn't know anything about 9 tons. We didn't know there was cannons and all that stuff buried underneath.
Dennis, can you just, sorry to interject, can you just explain what the KGC is? Because that's one of the things I did not go into detail about. I didn't know what your comfort level was with that. So.
Yeah, I was hoping Warren would step in and take over. If he intervenes in this call, I'll let him do that. But the KGC is known as the Knights of the Golden Circle. They're Southern sympathizers. They were for the South during the war. What they did, they moved into Pennsylvania as a private group. They organized people in Pennsylvania that were for the Confederate Army. And they went ahead and had military supplies shipped in from France and Great Britain into Canada, and from Canada came in from this northern part of the Pennsylvania down through. But they stockpiled ammunition, gunpowder, cannons, whatever they could get in the caves, coal mines, all throughout Pennsylvania in a straight line. The line goes from Erie down to Philadelphia. We've got 10 sites picked out so far where there's cannons and guns and stuff stockade. Had the Confederate Army made it through Gettysburg, they would have gone into 30 miles into the state, hit the first supply depot, and then gone 30 miles, hit another supply depot, and straight up to Erie. I believe they were trying to cut the state in half. By doing so, they would have shut off the gold supply from California, and that alone would have hurt the Union Army. So that's what all this is about. We didn't know any of this stuff back then when we called the FBI.
Speaking of Warren Getler, he's texting me now. He's ready to jump on if you'd like me to add him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
I really don't know what's going on. This is so weird. This is like 1 out of 1,000 times comms are so bad like this. I don't know what's going on. But anyway.
Dennis was just talking about the KGC and the tunneled transport systems for supplies and gold. And he had said that maybe you could embellish on that a little bit. So basically what we're doing is this is your venue to tell your story. Let us know what we got right. Let us know what we got wrong.
Essentially, it was a joint project with the FBI. They had agreed verbally, we didn't put anything in writing, to allow us to participate in a dig for rumored Confederate gold, meaning gold of the Knights of the Golden Circle and their allied group in the north, the Copperheads. And that was the deal. And we brought them evidence that there was a likely target there based on Denny's work, and then some science that we eventually got to jointly. In my background in the Knights of the Golden Circle and their MO for burying treasure and why it would be there as a kind of force in the north that was undermining the war efforts of the Union in the mountains, kind of like if you thought about the Viet Cong and Vietnam and that kind of situation, ununiformed groups burying arms and maybe precious metals to continue the war effort from the inside. And Abraham Lincoln was very concerned about the Confederate groups, Confederate sympathizing groups in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and other places. He called it the fire in the rear, the fifth column. So it was a fact that the Copperheads were very active in Denny's area in central Pennsylvania, where you guys are, which is very important, because what had to be proven for the FBI to move on this to seize what could have been stolen U.S. property is they had to show if it was there, the target, based on good science, and they had to show why it was there and who put it there. So we got past all that. We did some tests with the FBI on equipment, devices that I had recommended because I have a background in some geophysics. And it all turned out pretty positive. But the crux of the matter is this. We agreed to do this as a partnership, which is unusual. And they said we could be there on site the whole time. They never put conditions around it except for one, no cell phones for video or pictures, and no media, even though I have a background as a journalist. So we agreed to that, and it was to be done at a certain time from 10 a.m. from 6 a.m. I believe to 10 p.m. And, we didn't know how long it would take. Was it going to be a one-day operation or two? Well, long story short, they cut it short on the first day. It wasn't dark. They claimed it was dark, and it wasn't that cold. And they said, we'll continue tomorrow. So they had dug down on a key spot about 6 feet or so. We knew that the target was maybe 8 to 10 feet down. So they stopped short of it and really shocked us. It was very surprising. And they sent us home saying, we'll come back tomorrow and get this done. So I've come to the point now, if I were a lawyer presenting to the jury the summary of the case to begin with so they understood it, that's the scenario. So now I'm going to get into the rub of the case. The rub of the case is this. They stopped. They told us to come home the next day. They had kept us in the car all that time and then let us up for a very short amount of time that first day. and March 13th. And then we went home. Well, here's the case. The case is they did a night dig, and we can prove it on many levels. But if they did a night dig and they came up with nothing, here's the logic. If we can essentially prove they did a night dig with witnesses, eyewitnesses who heard it going on, 2 of them, 3 of them. People don't lie. They don't have any dog in the fight. They don't get their dates mixed up either. So if we can show that a night dig happened, here's the total logical issue. Why, if they did a night dig and nothing happened, why would they send in 4 armored cars the next day, the next morning? You don't do that. You don't randomly send in armored cars if you've done a night dig, which we can prove. And it just doesn't make any sense financially, logically, anyway. Mm-hmm. So the point that we make is we have evidence of this, and there's a lot more to the circumstantial case. They won't hand over their operational plan. They won't hand over their operational plan, which includes, we have to assume, talking about torchlights, which are mentioned in the affidavit. They needed torchlights for the site, not for the setup site, but for the actual dig site. Why would you need torchlights unless you're going to do a night dig? So they're not handing over their operational plan, which would have detailed the night dig, all the preparations for it. They're refusing to hand that over still, despite our FOIA. There are no videos taken of the second day, none, only the first day. In terms of the night dig evidence, the woman, Cheryl, who lives at the bottom of the hill, who was a town official, she was kept up most of the night by the noise, and in fact called her husband to complain, who was on a trip away from the site, saying they're keeping me up. It's 1 or 2 in the morning, and they're bright lights, and it's so noisy. They're using machines up there. Well, come on. It's not a city. It's a small town. It's a small village, hunting village, and there's no noise. So she was well aware, and she could see vehicles coming up and down the hill that night, loading stuff into the back of SUVs there. Months later, years later, I must say, years later, I made a mistake. Years later, a witness came forward who was an antler shed hunter, and he said he witnessed activity that night looking for antler sheds across the road, across the hilltops, right there. He could see massive activity going on late at night, more like 4 or 5 in the morning, going on well before the start time that they were supposed to start. This was in the nighttime, past midnight and before 6. And not only did he hear and see that, he had good eyes, but he eventually walked closer to the site and saw armored cars that were weighted down passing by the same time that we had, at the same time that we had been told that armored cars had gone by a cop, a Pennsylvania cop who happens to know Kem, on that second critical day of the dig, when it had already occurred that night. We were told that an armored car convoy had passed by Weedsville and basically where this was, Dents Run, by a cop who I spoke to. I wouldn't ever reveal his name, but he told me as an officer that had happened. So just to summarize, you have Cheryl, a town official, hearing this up the hill, complaining about it all night. You have a cop telling us the convoy goes by that next day, which is Wednesday, the 14th. And then you have an eyewitness with his buddy saying they saw the weighted down armored cars, and he personally saw the activity going on the hill. They won't reveal the operational plan. There's no video. And Denny will get into this with you. The black and white pictures were distorted. We see a pipe that was intact the night before. It's broken the next day, critical to the site itself. So that's my summary for you.
That's crazy. Like, you have really credible like witnesses that, like, sometimes you can take what people say with a grain of salt, but you have people that, are very reliable telling you this information. That is huge.
I believe so. And Denny will tell you, and realize that Kem is a cop. Kem is in law enforcement, and so I've always taken law enforcement people by their word. And so when an officer is speaking with me, he's telling me what he saw, not Kem. Ken's friend. I take that very credibly. The other thing is the FBI itself, and Denny will go into this with you, did some diagrams that were very telling about a very big trench that would have gone into the area that they must have dug, and the depth issues. So it is a shame. My philosophical comment is, why did they have to go this route? So it's very historical. It's not just the money involved, and there is a great deal of money involved, over $500 million, if it indeed were found. And I'll make this statement as well. We were prevented from proving beyond a reasonable doubt. You know how that statute, that level of proof is defined, from showing smoking ingots coming out of the ground, not a smoking gun, but smoking ingots coming out of the ground. We never were able to prove with film or video or anything of the like, because we were prevented from being on the mountaintop by a bevy of armed, semi-automatic weapon-carrying FBI police. We never had a chance to see it go down as we were promised. But we can, in our mind, prove with a preponderance of the evidence that a night dig happened, and therefore it was taken at that time, and that the scientific evidence we had pointed to a mass that had a density very, very different from the sedimentary rock, which is a 2.3 reading. It had a 19.5 reading, which is exactly that of gold. So we have a really strong rack of evidence that this happened. And it's a shame, because history and students and college students and just your average person around the world who's so interested in this, reading these, 1,000 copies of this article in every major publication, that they were denied seeing this. Denny had worked on it for some 15 years with his son, including the time with the FBI and me being there. And I had worked on it for a bunch of years as well with them. And it's been 6 years. Denny and I have been on the phone almost every day, and Kem and I speak about once a month. And that's it for me.
Let me say something about the people living up there. We had an enormous amount of phone calls of witnesses of what they saw. 16 of them went before the Associated Press and gave their story. So 16 people gave very damaging information about the FBI, what they saw. But we had many, many phone calls.
Yeah, to Denny's point, I did forget that. The reporter for the AP did some terrific work. He interviewed a young woman who saw a convoy of FBI coming in and the armored car actually going past. What they saw as armored car. We showed her several pictures of armored cars that might have been used, and she identified one in particular. So Denny is right. It wasn't just the 2 or 3 that I mentioned. There were several others.
Can you tell us more about the history of this gold? Because so much of the doubt of this comes from, there's no records. This is just the first instance is this article from 1972 or 73, I think. And can you tell us a little bit more about the background of it?
I can, and Denny will have his own views and Kem. So the specific story that was floated in various, treasure magazines and whatnot, I think has a kernel of truth to it. It might be specifically correct about it being transported from California to St. Louis to West Virginia and then over to avoid, Lee's incursion into Pennsylvania. There's probably some truth to it, but basically when I read about this, I saw it as what we call a waybill by the Knights of the Golden Circle. It's generally saying, here's a story, take it for what it's worth, but if you're insider, what it's really telling you is where it is. And Denny has the story that is very specific to where it is, mentioning Bell's Draft, etc. And that's what caught my attention, and how it was written caught my attention. The wording in it was very Knights of the Golden Circle code. So I don't know whether there were 50 bars or 26 bars, being carried by wagon. There's some logistical questions that you have to ask around that. But what they're telling me, as somebody who studied KGC writing, if you will, and symbolism and code, is yes, there was a burial of gold bars there, possibly covered in tar or concealed in that area. And so I can tell you as a fact that the Knights of the Golden Circle did waylay, hijack, let's say, stagecoaches during the Civil War in California. It's documented they did that, just like the story is basically saying. even though it was kind of an inside job with the Copperheads in Pennsylvania, but it's still the Knights of the Golden Circle. So what I'm trying to say is there is truth to it. Now, Denny did a lot of research in the records, U.S. military archive records and whatnot, which maybe tracked down one of the names, Castleton and others. Those names are very symbolic. The KGC's meeting place was called Castle. Another guy was called Rook. So a rook and a castle, they may be symbolic names, but Denny actually has some records that are very important that may relate to an actual character who lived there. So overall statement is the Knights of the Golden Circle were a subversive, ununiformed Confederate guerrilla operation. They worked under some very powerful raider types like Quantrell, and they involved Jesse James, and they were massively active all the way from, I'm going to tell you, Arizona, out west California, all the way back east to Georgia, Virginia, these areas, and they operated in the north, and they buried weapons and arms, cannons, rifles, whatnot, gold and silver, not just during the Civil War because they thought they would possibly lose as a result of a deficit of resources to fight again later, but they buried their riches after. This group existed for many decades after the Civil War. And I can tell you for a fact, because I've been working on this for 25 years in my book and whatnot, that they buried a lot of gold and silver and arms.
Now, the 52 bars you're talking about, the Union Gold, that wagon train, I found out, was real. Everything research I've done proves that it was a wagon train of 52 bars, but that was Union Gold. That's how the FBI got to do the dig, because they're only allowed to dig up Union Gold. Now, we didn't know there was a lot of other gold there, which could have been Confederate gold, but we believe it came in from Great Britain and France, which, like I said, went into Canada and then down through the States. They buried it in a line from Erie to Philadelphia. The FBI got the okay to dig because of the 26 bars of Union Gold. They went through the records, the historical files, and they proved to the judge that it was a real part of the story. It was true. The rest of it, that's all the FBI was entitled to was Union Gold. The other 9 tons, they weren't allowed to take.
Let me come back on that. So I have to slightly amend that. They did not show in any record any proof that this was Union Gold. No, they said the story makes sense. There was some history of the Knights of the Golden Circle doing these kinds of raids on transports of gold, but they never proved, and there's no record officially of this happening. And as you said, Megan, to start, what they had to prove is it a credible story that this happened? And the answer was yes, because I spent a lot of time working with them on that issue. Yes, it's very credible. The Copperheads were there. The KGC's modus operandi was to steal the stuff. As Denny said, a lot of it was coming down from Canada, which is a separate story because of the Canadian, British, French, Canada were allies of the Confederacy. The point that Denny's making is this. They had a presumption that this was stolen Union Gold because of the story, and it made sense. Okay. The only way they can keep this gold or have succeeded with a federal judge, a magistrate, to take this is the assumption that these bars were stamped U.S. Mint. If they're not stamped U.S. Mint, let's say if they were smelted, they wouldn't have a right to keep them if they did seize them. Pennsylvania would have a right, and Denny and Kem would have a right to these bars. That's very important. So not allowing us to see what came out, which was our statement, we need to see these bars come out, we need to photograph them or participate in their photography because we couldn't have our phones. We need to feel them, we need to weigh them, we need to observe whether they had a mint stamp saying U.S. Mint, because that's the only way. If coins were there, the government necessarily wouldn't get to keep the coins. It's theirs only because they're in circulation. But U.S. Mint stamped gold bars, ingots, those are the property of the U.S. government. And that was the basis for them coming in and seizing this and telling the state to back off. And the other thing I'll add is the state was interfering through some elements with Denny and Kem's legitimate search for this gold. That's why Denny and Kem shut it down, because things were happening. I'm not going to go into details there. I'll leave that to Denny and Kem if they want to discuss it.
Lots of good information that I did not know.
And then I know, Dennis, in our conversation, you had mentioned that some of the reason the lack of records exist is because of the embarrassment this would be really for both sides, both the Union and the Confederate Party. Do you want to touch a little more heavily on that?
Well, one thing, the Chicago fire destroyed the Pinkerton's files. We had a fire here in Clearfield Courthouse that destroyed some of the files. But then again, President Lincoln didn't want none of the information to go public that they lost 52 bars of gold, thinking that the Confederate Army got it. It would have caused chaos on the bankruptcy of the country, whatever. The embarrassment that the idea that the Confederate Army, the Copperheads, could do something like this, bring military supplies and gold in from Canada and put it in Pennsylvania secretly for 5 years, not get caught, is amazing. But the biggest thing of it all is in Queehana, Pennsylvania. We found the main headquarters for the KGC. I mean, it's surrounded by 30,000 feet of barbed wire fencing, which is very expensive back then. There's 6 campsites. We know where they cooked their meals at, where they went to the bathroom and everything. This was a big operation. A lot of people were inside this compound. And we believe that there were Union prisoners inside this fenced area. And if there was Union prisoners, they were digging all these underground chambers, holes, and tunnels in which the KGC could put all the military supplies in. Now, to think of an operation looking like a logging camp disguise, and they got away with this all those years, nobody caught them. It's totally embarrassing for the Union side to admit that this actually happened. But then again, the Confederate doesn't want to let this information go out because they did a lot of murdering and a lot of things in Pennsylvania, and they're living next door to their neighbors, and yet they're stabbing them in the back by undermining the Union Army. I mean, a lot of soldiers, whoever was prisoners down there, had to be put to death at the end of the war because these guys knew the locations of where the gold was buried. These were the guys that knew where the cannons and the guns and everything was buried. They could not let these guys loose at the end of the war because if they told what the KGC did, the KGC would be executed as treason. So I could see where the Confederate Army wanted to keep it quiet, and I could see where the Union Army was embarrassed and they didn't want to talk about it. So
Yeah.
in the government, that when President Lincoln didn't want nobody to know the gold was disappeared, so the whole thing has been hushed up. Yeah,
That's a great point, Jenny. So let me build on that a little bit. So the question was perfect, was right on, and the answer was right on. There's actually some evidence that it would cause embarrassment. So in 1857, the SS Central America sank, and it was carrying a huge amount, 30,000 pounds of gold, and a lot of people were on board. Something like 578 passengers and 425 people died. And when it sank, it caused a panic. It caused a gold panic, an economic panic in the country. That was in 1857, the SS Central America. So there's precedent for that embarrassment, and as Denny said, the ripple effects being felt. So that's very interesting. And they might have shipped gold from California to, like I said, by rail to St. Louis, and then they would have taken it either directly to Philadelphia by overland, or maybe they did go up to West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia, which had just separated from Virginia and joined the Union. And because it was a border state, so at that time, 1863, I think it had become a separate state, but anyway, it might have been still part of Virginia. They moved, and the story says they moved overland into where Denny is in the Alleghenies. The Alleghenies are a very interesting spot to hide out, not too far from Canada, which was their cross-border resource, and it's in the mountains, and it's at the heart of the Union effort. Pennsylvania Union fighters were some of the best. So here you have a Viet Cong-like operation within their ranks. A writer who wrote a book about 10 years after my book, Rebel Gold, came out, is David Keene. He's an amateur historian. He's a lawyer. He wrote a very good book about the Knights of the Golden Circle, and he focused on what they did in Pennsylvania, where the meeting houses were, the castles, what they did. Not so much on the military efforts that we're talking about at Queehana, which we call Copperhead Central, the site that Denny just talked about, where they may have mustered, may have buried weapons, et cetera, which we have data for. We have scans on this. But also, just the overall effort in various towns in central Pennsylvania, where the Pennsylvania Dutch in particular were very sympathetic towards the Confederacy.
So this may be a slightly dumb question, but back during that time, because what's hard for me to wrap is how did they get away with hiding their headquarters for so long that nobody questioned it, or was it? So my question there is, was that area very remote back during the Civil War, or was it quite popular?
We had other subjects where there was a ton of timbering during that time. So you had a lot of timber companies. You had so even in the remote areas, there were people around. So
Sure. I think that's what I struggle to wrap my head around, is just, as you said earlier, is
how they got
away with it for so long that even if the Union knew, like, why didn't some of the locals question it that were on the Union side of, hey, this seems a little odd?
Well, for one thing, Queehana is still a very remote place. There's only a few home camps there, but you could go miles in any direction and not find anything.
Okay.
There was a small town there that in order to get to the Queehana site, you had to go through this small town village, and we believe that was all connected with the Copperheads. It was disguised, we believe, as a lumber camp.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what we have to remember is Lincoln and his Judge Advocate General Holt, they knew that there were these pockets of resistance in sympathetic communities, and they might not want to have ventured in there unless they sent the troops in. A lot of folks wanted to send the troops in. He shut down newspapers in Clearfield and things like that. It's called a tyrant for doing so, Abraham Lincoln. But he didn't send in special forces to check out militarily some of these potential hideouts. When Denny said headquarters, it might have been the local Copperhead headquarters, not the headquarters of the Knights of the Golden Circle. That was in places like Nashville and Charleston, South Carolina, and whatnot. But yes, Denny and some of his team members have, and I've been there with him. It was shown in the article in Popular Mechanics, have found an incredible layout of I would say a garrison, barbed wired, all kinds of buried things. Denny has found artifacts there on the surface, cannon parts and whatnot, that are very telling. And then we bring in the same kind of equipment that's pretty sophisticated, the EM31, the EM64, that can scan the ground underground and show imagery of iron being buried there 12 feet down. We have those images, and they're pretty specific. They're not 3D, they're 2D.
Ethan, you asked a good question there, and let me follow up with that. They're still covering up today what happened back then. We went to the Historical Society down in Lock Haven and asked them, there's a big chimney still standing. The log cabin burnt down at the Queehana Copperhead site. The log cabin burnt down, and so did the barn right after the Civil War, okay? And I went to the Historical Society and I asked them to do some research. They told me that was a hunting camp during the Civil War, owned by a lawyer and a doctor. And I said, my God, there's 30,000 feet of barbed wire fencing, Civil War artifacts all over the place, cannon parts, everything. Then it's just a hunting camp. Well, you don't put 30,000 feet of barbed wire fencing around a hunting camp, okay? And they kept blocking this, and it keeps denying that it has anything else other than a hunting camp. Yet we have at least a pickup truck load of artifacts from the Civil War that do not belong in a hunting camp. They'll block us till everybody's still trying to block us.
But by the way, it's wire. It's not barbed wire. It's pre-barbed wire during the Civil War. They didn't have barbed wire until 1869, but it's
Sure.
like barbed, but it doesn't have quite the same features as barbed wire. Yeah, I mean the place is amazing. There's all kinds of KGC type symbolism there.
Denny, was that lawyer and Dr. Benjamin Rush who you had told me about?
That's the name I come up with, not the Historical Society. But he would be the main lawyer in Lock Cave, and he was the biggest lawyer. He had not slaves, but he had servants in the house. He's the number one target we have, and his grandfather did sign the Declaration of Independence, and his grandfather was against slavery. So here you have the grandson, if we have the right attorney, that's being for slavery. And it's kind of interesting, 2 months after the war ended, he died. He was a very young guy and in good health, but we don't know how he died. There's no death records. We believe that something bad happened to him because he had all the information of all the maps. He knew where all the depot sites were from Pennsylvania right up through. There's a lot that's going to go down on this, if that's the real Benjamin Rush, yes.
And to continue, if we could, on the historical side, we've put together a very speculative bit of theory and history here, speculative history, and it's the following, that, the Dents Run story is talking about how General Lee was coming north and this Union payload, train to support, not really to pay the troops, but actually to pay off debt, perhaps, because these are bars. They didn't pay off troops in bars. So you hear about General Lee coming north, and this wagon train has to go north into Denny, up north, north central Pennsylvania to avoid them. Well, what else happened at that time? Almost the exact same time, KGC affiliated General John Hunt Morgan comes up from Kentucky with 2,500 troops, and he goes straight into Indiana and Ohio, hoping to gather KGC members, Copperheads in those states, to join him. John Hunt Morgan's raid is called historic. He makes it all the way to Pittsburgh in July of 1863. And at the same time that Lee is stopped at Gettysburg, Morgan is stopped at Pittsburgh, a pincer movement. It's our speculation that they were heading in the same direction to get to the Dents Run, Copperhead Central area in Queehana, to have the mother of all battles within the Union. It's just our speculation. You had what we believe is gold there. You had weapons buried there. And you had a big bevy of ununiformed, underground Confederate sympathizing soldiers.
Can we change it in a way to where us digging inside the cave? Give you some information on that. Kem, do you want to go ahead and tell them what it was like digging in there?
Oh, yeah. When we started there, heck, the opening of the cave was only about 2 feet high and maybe 5 feet wide. But once we got in there past the threshold, it was still only 2 feet tall. We were crawling on our bellies. It's kind of exciting. We're under a giant boulder. We're trying to go back into this cave. It's narrow. It's confining. We were told to just keep going straight back, and we're like, well, you can't. There's no room. And we started removing dirt, and that's when we found the man-made wall, just flat rocks stacked up. And eventually, the 5-foot wide opening opened up to about 25, 30 feet. We pulled that man-made wall down, and there was another room, and we just kept going back. There was cave crickets, camelback spiders crawling around in there. It was pretty interesting. And then we opened up an underground spring, and then it got wet. Just laying on our stomachs, laying on our backs in this water, just trying to remove dirt and basically tunneling. And yeah, it was quite an experience I'll never forget.
What about the torches?
The chisel marks.
Yeah, the burn marks in the ceiling.
Yeah, sitting there laying on our stomachs, and we're tunneling and trying to dig and move dirt, and it gets tiring after a while. So you roll over on your back, and we're laying there, and we're taking a break, and we look up, and we notice that the roof of this cave, the underside of this boulder, it's black charcoal. Not charcoal, but black soot and everything, like it was burning. We're like, what the heck? And we started looking, and there's holes, chiseled holes into the ceiling, big enough, they put torches in there, and that's what the torches put the black marks on the ceiling of the cave. And we were following the line, the smoke, and it went towards the back of the cave. And we're like, well, heck, there's got to be a vertical shaft back there, like a chimney. And that's what led us to keep going straight back. Yeah, and it was an experience.
The KGC, to what Kem was saying, used underground features like this cave to conceal their treasure, and they used mud and rocks and these kinds of man-made walls that you wouldn't necessarily notice unless you're bumping up against them 20 feet underground, crawling underground that far. And what's very interesting is at almost every major KGC treasure site, there is a turtle-shaped rock or feature. And this cave that they're crawling under, Denny and Kem and the team, was definitely in the shape of the turtle. They all called it a turtle. And one of the key signs that the KGC and their leader, their commander, Jesse James, used what was a turtle laying eggs for gold.
There was a bunch of other things there that proved that was KGC. There was a hoot owl tree. There was things that were buried so many feet from the hoot owl tree. It's all the measurements that the KGC used in the Knights Templar. It's all number 30, 60, 90, 120, so forth. Everything at Dents Run is measured off in 15, 30, 60, 90. There's underground chambers, rooms, but there's carvings on rocks all over the place that prove that it's a KGC site, 100%.
And those carvings and those distances was the system deployed by the Knights of the Golden Circle to get their members back to where stuff was buried. If you understood the geometry and the key starting point, the survey stone or whatever, you could go certain distances and expect to find a carving on a tree that lasts a long time. Certain trees live 200 years, or a rock face that's not exposed to, rivers of torrential water to erode it, et cetera, et cetera. So that was their system. It was based on geometric insider knowledge.
I would not have survived the cave.
Yeah, I don't think you obviously can't see Meg and I's faces, but when Kem started describing, I think we both were just like,
You lost me at the spiders. I don't do spiders.
Like,
Well,
was it more like the adrenaline that kept you going, or was at any point where you just absolutely like, no, we're not going to move forward this way? Like, that just sounds terrifying to me.
Almost every trip, we found something that kept us going. It kept the hope going constantly, yeah. Now, Kem, he has an interesting story from going up that hill with the FBI. I'll let him tell you about that part.
Which one are you referring to?
Jake Archer said, well, okay, I'm jumping ahead from us digging to the FBI, Jake Archer, saying it's time to go up and finish the dig after we sit in the car for 6 hours.
When we went up there and there was just a massive hole.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the night before, whenever we left, the hole was maybe, 7-8 feet deep and like 12 foot in diameter. And we were told to come back the next morning and we would start digging right where we left off. Everybody would be there, and we got up there and we were waiting. It was snowing a little bit, nothing major. And they said, stay in the car, stay warm. The hole filled up with water. They're, DCNR, DEP, they're raising the stink, and, we got to find a way to get the water out of this hole. Me, my dad, and Warren were like, all right. So we sat in the car. And now I slept. I wasn't paying much attention. And every now and then I'd hear my dad and Warren fighting and, arguing and bickering about Agent Archer and the something about his pants and how many times he's been going, making trips to the restroom. The dogs are going nuts. So after a few hours, I didn't realize how much time was passed because I was sleeping. They said, all right, we get out, and Jake Archer comes over, and we start, asking questions like, what the heck is going on? He goes, hey, it's time to go up the hill. I'm like, all right. So we start this hike up the mountain, and we get up there, and, it was just a different feeling to the atmosphere. And Warren even says it was like a Shakespeare play. Like the day before, all the agents, they were friendly, they were talking to us, they were happy. Today, none of them would have acknowledged us. They wouldn't look at us or anything. They weren't talking to us. And we get up there, and all these agents are lined up around this hole, and they opened up like the Red Sea. They parted, and we walked through, and this 8 foot deep, 12 foot diameter hole is now about 20 feet deep and almost 30 feet in diameter. Like, it was a massive hole. And we're like, what the heck? You weren't supposed to dig. You know, we were supposed to come up here and watch it all dig at the same time. And I started looking around, and I'm like, I thought he said the hole was filled with water. I'm like, these aren't muddy sides. Like, this is fresh dug. And I'm like, well, maybe they got a water pump. And I'm looking, I'm like, well, there's no water pump. Like, how did they get the water out of this hole? And I'm like, well, maybe they used the backhoe and they scooped it and dumped it. And I started looking around in the snow, and there's no signs of water being dumped anywhere in the snow. It's fresh snow. Like, there's nothing. It was all a lie. It was all a ruse. Meanwhile, my dad and Agent Archer, and they're talking and, you know, bickering, and I'm like, yeah, like something's not right here. I'm like, Dad, let's just, you know, knock it off. Something's not right. And we got escorted down off the mountain, and Warren was leading first, and me, my dad, and Agent Archer are walking, and as we're walking down the hill, we get close to the bottom, and the day before we were in this green tent, and Warren went to go to that green tent, and the FBI police stopped them. They're like, hey, you can't go in there. And Warren's like, what the heck? He's like, well, okay, we were there yesterday. Why can't we go in there now? And Agent Archer walks up to us, and he goes, I'm telling you right now. He says, you don't go to the media. You put nothing on Facebook. You tell nobody nothing about what happened here. He says, if you do, there'll be serious repercussions. And he turned and pointed at me and says, you got your law enforcement career to worry about. Oh. I was like, what the heck? I'm like, what the heck was this about? I mean, we asked him, like, what did you take out of that hole? And he goes, it's none of your business. You're never going to know.
Wow.
The interesting thing about that dig that they did, the night dig, during the first day, see, we have 8-foot copper rods going down into the site. We had 12 of them. They're 8 foot long. Over a 2-year period of drilling, we left them in the ground. Now, the first day that they dug, we were there. They pulled 3 rods out, laid them on the ground, copper rods. And then he called a stop to the dig. He said, we'll come back tomorrow. When we came up that hill the next day, they made us carry those rods down the hill and all the scrap stuff we had. Well, when I got to the bottom of the hill, I realized there was 9 rods. I'm like, well, hell, wait. When I left yesterday, there was 3, and now we're up to 9. So it proved that they did more digging throughout the night.
Yeah.
Their big mistake was to let me carry those rods down. I still have them. And I said to Jake, I says, where did the other 6 come from? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, you had to dig into the silver area. He says, Dennis, we didn't do anything. It was they made a lot of mistakes. Let's just put it that way.
Another key factor, if you guys sift through the evidence, you'll see that the pieces of the puzzle come together. Jake Archer, who was in charge of all this thing, we all enjoyed his company and had respect for him. He never went up to the top of the mountain where the dig was supposed to take place that second day. He stayed down where our car was parked and kept an eye on us coming in and out. And I noticed when he did come to the car, and we sat there for another 6 hours after the first day of sitting there 6 or 7 hours. And that's why I was getting so agitated in the back. Like, this is ridiculous. And Denny was quiet. He was like a hawk watching everything. Kem was asleep. but I was agitated. Anyway, so he comes up to the car, kind of smiling, and I noticed this huge gash on the back of his hand. And I go, dude, I say, hey, Jake, what'd you do? Get in a fight? Did you bang a wall? What'd you do? And he didn't answer. If you ask me, he got it from digging in the ground all night, right? That's speculation. But anyway, so he never goes up to watch the dig progress that he's organized under federal magistrate's seizure mandate. So he never goes up that morning. He stays below because what was going on up there was a backhoe operator, private backhoe operator, that's filling it all back in for us to go see. There's no videographer happening that day. So they had used a private operator to start the dig that first day, but they took over control of that backhoe or excavator, mini excavator, to do their own work that night. So there's a lot going on. Let me add to Kem's description. So we're walking up there, that critical moment, and Jake's attitude has become very serious. Like, he's mumbling. He's not saying anything to me as we walk up. And Denny is trailing behind. I don't know exactly where Kem was. And we get up there, and it is a Shakespearean play. The stage is set. The FBI officers are lined up, arms crossed, steely-faced, staring at the hole. Denny and I are walked up to the hole, and Archer says, "Gentlemen, what do you see?" And we don't say anything. "Gentlemen, what do you see?" And I say, "An empty hole." And I start getting very nervous because I felt the geoscience that I kind of organized was wrong. But you know what? Just on that point, we asked him, "What happened here? Did you find the gold?" He wouldn't answer, like a good lawyer that he is. And he never asked me, "Warren, what went wrong with the data?" And he never called the geosurvey company that did the gravimeter test to ask them what went wrong, because I talked to them afterwards. "Did you hear from the FBI?" They said no. So I gave you a little bit of a sidebar there. Now let's go back to the scene. We're walked up there, and as Kem said, there's this really large hole, and we can't tell exactly where it is based on where the sweet spot was from our own readings before, but it's there, and it's empty, and it's pretty deep, and it's not wet. So the bit about the water leakage problem is baloney that they had been telling us that morning. And they throw that question at me, "What do you see?" And I say, "An empty hole." Danny gets up there like Elias in Platoon with his arms out, and he says, "Nothing. I see nothing." But that doesn't mean there was nothing here yesterday. And it was really, really dramatic. It was biblical in my mind, or Shakespearean, because Denny had spent all those years with Kem and the guys in the mud trying to get to this thing. And we're kind of stopped by some elements in the DCNR, I would say, and there's a long story there. And here we brought the FBI to get this historical stuff out of the ground and participate for a finder's fee. Denny and Kem wanted the finder's fee. And that's all legit, and that was what was said, agreed upon.
And let me step in and say something here.
Go ahead.
When we went up to the hill, and there was 30-some agents with their arms crossed, shoulder to shoulder around the hole. It was like a wall the whole way around of humans, okay? And they opened up enough just for the three of us to walk inside that. Okay, that's a very dramatic situation at the time. But I want to back down to the tent now. Like he was saying, Jake Archer was in that tent day 2. Him and his lady friend, she's an agent. Those were the only 2 people in that tent on day 2. On day 1, it was like open house. Everybody in and out of that tent, even DCNR, and we were in the tent. Day 2, nobody got in that tent other than Jake Archer and the lady that was with him. That was it. The state police that showed up stayed out front. They had to go out and talk to them, and we watched. I said, nobody's going in that tent. The only thing we figured, the night before when they were digging, they loaded up, Cheryl said, there were 12 or 15 SUVs at nighttime would back up in the area of the green tent, and the quads would bring these things down. The quads were coming down the hill, and they'd unload stuff into the SUVs. Then the SUV would pull out in the road, another one would back in, the quads would come down, load them up. That happened to 12 to 15 SUVs. I think what happened is they ran out of SUVs, and before daybreak, they put the rest of the gold and silver in the green tent. Now, the green tent is off limits to everybody on day 2, and they're waiting for nighttime to come so they could load it up in the armored trucks. There was armored trucks in the morning of day 1, and there was armored trucks that came in again at the nighttime of day 2.
Day 2, you mean day 2?
Morning of day 2, and then nighttime of day 2, yeah. So there was 2 sets of armored trucks that came in, and when the armored trucks came in both times, the residents had to stay in their homes. The military police were there, put them back in their homes, and the roads were blocked off until the armored trucks left. Now, they didn't do that on day 1 when they showed up. That only happened during when the armored trucks were coming and going. They shut the roads down. People had to stay in their homes. So, I mean, there's a lot behind this. We believe the gold and silver sat in that green tent the entire day while we were sitting there. Because Jake Archer never left. He never went up the hill, nothing.
We believe they took some of it around to the other side of the mountain and carried that off. That's where those first armored trucks went. The excess was in the green tent. The woman who drove me down the hill after showing us the empty hole. She was very chatty, and I got off on the side of the green tent, and she barked at me out of the blue to get away from there, crazy. And crazy surprise to me. And let me just finish with the comment I was making. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say when I was shocked by the empty hole, I mean, I really think because I was so excited that finally, the KGC treasure would be coming out of the ground for history's sake. And I had spent 25 years since my book was written I started the book in 1998, the book I wrote with Bob Brewer, Rebel Gold. And 25 years later, almost to the day, that happened. So at the time, it was more like 20 years. But I was crushed for Denny. I looked at the man who's a wonderful guy and a tough guy and a thoughtful guy and a caring person, and as is his son. And I said, this is really tragic. What's going on here? And when he put his finger towards Kem and said, your law enforcement career could be risky, and he pointed his finger at me saying, no media, and I am media in a sense. And he told Denny to go find another profession. We kind of knew something was up, but it took us a group effort, guys. It took us a group effort to go out and dig for the truth. And I said, what we need to do? We need to interview everybody in that town, what they saw, what they did. And Kem and Denny and myself, we went around with video cameras and we interviewed people, and we couldn't believe what we started to hear about military helicopters passing over, about the night gig with Cheryl. That was amazing. And then these other folks came forward later.
I have a quick question for you, just to kind of that ties in with that. You had mentioned something interesting after the gold had left about where it was going. Did you want to touch on that, or do you want to?
We can't prove it, but okay. When they sent us home that first day and said we'll be back tomorrow, about 2 hours later or 3 hours later, I get a phone call that the gold is in transport and is leaving the country. So I'm like, you're kidding me. So I took off and I drove up there real quick, and everybody was gone. That was the end of day two. Yeah, I'm sorry. Then I get a phone call right back again that the gold is headed to a foreign country, and it started with the letters S, like Saudi Arabia, something like Saudi something. And I said, okay. And then the next morning I hear that 9 tons of gold fell out of a cargo plane in Siberia, and that starts with an S. And the FBI was going after 9 tons of gold and silver, and here 9 tons of gold and silver fell out of a cargo plane. And it's all across the runway. They took videos of it and everything. And they're dory bars like ours. And there's gemstones, and that's supposed to be at our place. We're supposed to have gemstones. So the airplane takes off after they get all the gold scraped back up, and it took off to Toronto, Canada, to a refinery up there. And the initials of the refinery on their trading symbols is KGC.
So that was a psychic. That was a psychic who called Denny, and that's great. And it wasn't a source saying it's leaving the country. It's a psychic. And I heard that conversation in the background. I was there. And there's a company called Kinross Gold Corporation. They're a famous gold mining and diamond mining corporation. It's a strange, weird coincidence, and that's what I think it is, nothing more, that happened, that a plane crashed. It didn't crash. It dropped its load of gold bars and I think some diamonds on a runway, but they process gold in Siberia. I looked into it. It's just a strange coincidence, if you ask.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence. If the gold went to Canada and came into Pennsylvania, KGC, the gold ended up going back to Canada to KGC. That's my opinion.
Okay.
It is very interesting.
It's strange.
It's strange. Anyway, what were you going to say about the cave? I'm sorry for interrupting.
Well, yeah, we've been in the Washington, D.C., down there with the federal case for about 1.5 years, 2 years now, and I've never seen a case dragged out and stalled so much by the DOJ. They just came up with every excuse they could to delay the case every time something came up. The thing is, from the information we got from the FBI files, there's over 900 photographs that were doctored and redone by the FBI. From colored photographs, they were turned into black and white. They were using high contrast, low resolution, and they used Photoshop to turn the excavator solid black. By doing so, they could move the photographs that were taken at late night sunset and turn them into early morning. And they got to move these photographs around. So that was to cover up the night dig, basically, by turning the photographs like they did. They erased the timestamps on all 900 photographs and blocked them, so you can't pull the timestamps up. They went clear out of their way to destroy as much evidence as they could in these photographs. And along with some paperwork that's been altered, the FBI did one massive cover-up to hide something, but they found nothing.
Yeah, Denny and I looked up the make of the camera. Oh, Denny had trail cams there, so we could take pictures, but they seemed to have been shut down during the night dig time. Exactly during that time, Denny's one last trail cam that was up there was turned off, probably remotely. But we have pictures of the camera that their cameraman was using, and we know that camera was a Nikon? What was the brand?
Nike, I think Nikon.
Nikon.
Yes.
Nikon. So it definitely has timestamps on it, and there were no timestamps on the archived photos they were forced to hand over under the FOIA hearings that were having.
Anyway, we're still waiting. We've been put on hold again for the final part of our court case. It's the judge is ruling on if we get the 20-page pre-dig report, whatever they call it, and they are fighting to no end to keep that from us. The judge says unless they come up with a better reason, we will get those papers, and that's what we're waiting for. And we're still on hold waiting.
They've never provided expenditures, T&E receipts for this mission they were on. They never said how many agents were involved. And we know they came from D.C., Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Quantico. There were over 60. They commandeered a hotel there. Denny has people in the neighborhood who saw a lot of support vehicles at gas stations waiting to go in. And it was a big operation. So they never said like what it actually, the bill was for it, what they found. They never reported back to the judge what they found. They were supposed to.
The pre-dig 20 pages we're waiting for, if we get them, this place was like a military operation. Everything was documented, who showed up, when they showed up, minute by minute, everything was done. On the pre-dig, this is the paperwork before they even came to Dents Run. It would tell what time the armored trucks would come, who's in charge. It would tell you what time they're going to start the night dig. It would say everything. And that's what they're fighting to keep quiet. They said if they release that paperwork, it'd mess up their ways of doing secrecy and it'd cause harm to their people in the future or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what they said. We have an interest, once we hear back from the judge in this final phase and get all the documents we can, to take this in front of Senate for them to review the whole situation, whether there was gold found and taken and how much and where to go, and did they do this night dig, because that would be the basis of it.
Now, I'm going to give you the update. If I can give you an update real quick, then I'll be done. The next stage we moved into is connecting back with DCNR. And my lawyer started, we met with the attorneys in Harrisburg and everything before Christmas, and we showed them where there's another 9 tons in the Dents Run area of gold. And we laid all the paperwork out, all the survey maps. I spent $20,000 last year getting this all this done. And we tried to work out a deal with DCNR that they go in, file the paperwork for this dig instead of the FBI, and we'd work with them, and that's why everything is on hold. They refuse to talk to us for 5 months. That's where we're at right now.
So Denny said 9 tons. I can't stand by that comment. I can say that the scans we did show that there's conductive metal buried, who knows how much, in the area of Dents Run that is full of these KGC markings. So there is more metal and potentially tunnel structure there. And in fact, the FBI's lead guy had said to Denny there might be more
in the area when this thing got going, and they seem to have rushed out with what they had in hand, and perhaps they left some behind. But on the basis of a scientific scan that's been done with various different instruments, not the gravimeter, other scans that show conductive metal per se, or yes, conductive metal underground, there is that still in that immediate area.
So my question then is, do you think that this gold was Union, was KGC, was a combination, and that's why the FBI is fighting so hard to cover up? Because if it's Union, it's theirs, right? I mean, aside from you would get a finder's fee. I guess if it's theirs, why all the secrecy?
The Union 22 or 52 bar, 26 or 52 bars, they would have been able to keep the FBI because it's Union. If Warren is correct, and this did come from France and Great Britain, it doesn't belong to the FBI. It's abandoned gold, and there's no ownership to it. It would belong to the state, and we'd get a finder's fee. If they would have came up, showed what they got, they'd had to turn it all over to DCNR right on site. By not showing it to anybody, they got to do what they want to do with it.
So rightfully so, your stake in it is a finder's fee either way. It's just a matter of, does the gold belong to DCNR, the state, or the federal government?
Right.
Yeah, there's not exact parallel to this, but there's a little bit of a back venue type of scenario that happens called Victoria Peak in New Mexico, where bars were allegedly seen by local people, and some of them were taken out and buried for safekeeping, but there was a bigger mother lode there, and that area became White Sands Missile Base, an Army base, and the question was, did the Army go in and seize it and keep it quiet and prevent the local family from their rights to participate? And that's a huge story. Started in the 30s, it went into the 60s and 70s through the Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon era, and got a lot of attention. The mystery remains there. Did the Army go in and grab that stuff with certain connections in Washington, and whatever happened to it? So,
Ethan, you brought up a good question there. DCNR was kept in the car behind us during the entire dig. They were not allowed to go up and see what was going on. So when we went to the meeting before Christmas, the DCNR attorneys, they believed nothing was found. And we go, what? And they go, we had people on site and no gold was found. What they did, they pulled this trick over top of us and DCNR. DCNR still believes that nothing was found. And we have to convince them that there was gold there to get them to go after the second pile. That's what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, and to me, it would make sense. They potentially have some large sum of money sitting there that they have claim to. You would think that they would be pushing a little bit and helping you guys with, especially with these documents of, hey, we need to see these because if it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to us. And we just need proof that whatever they found, because in my mind, you said when you guys went up the hill to see the hole, and maybe, Kem, maybe you as in law enforcement can speak to this a little bit, but I feel like if there was nothing there, you guys probably would have got a little more than, see, nothing's here, and more of a lecture of, please don't waste our time. This is ridiculous. You just exhausted a huge amount of money and resources to bring us out here to find nothing.
The fact that nothing was found is what bothers me.
Sure.
Because we had 13 different pieces of equipment, 3 different companies up there, major companies in the East Coast. These were the big ones. And not to find any metal. There was black streaks coming out of the cave, and I had them tested. The report was it was pig iron that was bleeding out of the cave. It was running out through the water. And I said, what the hell is pig iron? They said that was from the Civil War area. And that there's probably Civil War metal in there. Now, the clay around the pig iron turned gray from the rust. When pig iron rusts, it turns black. So when the backhoe was digging on day one, They dug down 6 feet at my location, and then they started pulling out gray clay. And I'm like, wow, I have that on photograph too, that the gray clay came out. As soon as they hit the gray clay, they stopped digging. Now, the next day I go up there. He says he found nothing. I said, well, you had to find iron, pig iron. Where the hell's the pig iron? The pig iron was actually 32 military containers stacked on top of the gold. They were the shipping containers that the gold came in on. That's what we drilled down into. We have scans of the boxes laid out on top of the gold. We have those scans. We know there was metal objects there, but the FBI said no metal was found at all, and that was wrong. Definitely wrong.
Yeah, so let's go into the science. This is important where we are right now. So the gravimeter, I recommended a bunch of systems that they could use, something called the M31 and A64, which is conductivity. The gravimeter measures the density of the object underground. It's used for broad spaces and maybe special targets that are very large underground that show up as a big anomaly, because gold is way more dense than sedimentary rock, which it was surrounded by. Okay, so it should show up like a big red blob. Well, the person who wound up getting the contract for $5,000, I had recommended, based on my research, about 5 firms, and they chose 2 things. They chose one system, a gravimeter, which was the right choice. It has a very specific signature for gold. Metal detectors can't tell you if you find gold underneath. A gravimeter can, because of the density signature. So they chose gravity. We have the text as the system. And then they chose a firm, which changed its name, but it was called EnviroScan. And the head of EnviroScan is Tim Bechtel. And Tim Bechtel did the survey. Now, Tim Bechtel, before this, was awarded the #1 highest ranking award among geosurvey specialists in the world out of 32,000 people. And he had also done gravimeter work for the U.S. Army, U.S. Corps of Engineers before this, with the same Syntrex gravimeter system. Do you think he got it wrong? I tried to reach Tim, and he said he couldn't comment because they're under contract at the time and still NDA with the FBI. But his wife said this when I talked to her. We stand by our findings for a very dense, extremely dense object there. You know, Tim does excellent work, and no, they never did call us. That's right. They never did call us to find out what went wrong if they didn't find anything with their survey. So here you have a highly, highly recognized guy doing the work who had done work on the same system for the U.S. Army before.
Yeah, and I know I did some brief research on that piece of equipment and basically found that it is extremely accurate, and the chances of it not like reading something correctly, it's probably not actually the machine's fault. It would be the fault of the person operating it, but that is very, very rare.
The FBI, I have hundreds of pictures of the dig on day 1, and they used tape measures. They had the GPS. They had, every time they stopped the dig, the agents would jump in that hole with metal detectors, tape measures, and everything. They knew within inches where each section of gold was hidden underneath. They stopped within inches, and they'd stop the dig, move ahead to another dig, and they dig down so far, and then they stopped again. Then they moved ahead to our spot, and they dug down to 6 feet and stopped again. They went within inches or feet of the actual target and then sent everybody home. And
so Denny and Kem witnessed, I couldn't get there. Denny and Kem witnessed the work by EnviroScan with the gravimeter, with a couple of the FBI guys there. I couldn't make it. And that process took 5 hours. It's very meticulous. You move this small safe, it's like the size of a small safe. You move, it's heavy, and you move it 5 feet, 3 feet, in these increments over, let's say, a 20-yard area by 10 yards, or maybe bigger, Denny. But they did it over 5 hours. You have to take all these calculations for the slant of the slope and GPS and all this stuff each time. So it's very accurately done. It wasn't slam bam at all. And these are people who have used the system before. So all geophysics can be faulted, meaning you're not totally sure unless we call it ground truthing it by digging it up. Yes, there can be error. And I was I was shocked. I thought something had gone wrong, but the fact that they never called EnviroScan to find out what went wrong is stunning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that it also makes me, well, it doesn't make me wonder. I feel pretty confident in this, but it's like it feels like they clearly knew what depth they were going to and decided, hey, day one we're going to dig to this, and then we're digging it up overnight, and
enough to appease them,
enough
let them
to appease
see,
you guys,
let you
and
guys
see, hey,
see.
we're attempting to find this, and oh, so far nothing, and then it was like, oh, hey, we're down to within a couple feet, inches, whatever it was.
Yeah.
We can get this out overnight. We're going to stop here and say that's it for today.
And I can't get over, you have this gaping hole. If nothing was there, you would have had the same amount of material to fill it in.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the material?
Well, you're right. The guy at the bottom of the hill, Garrett, he climbed the hill. He used to run bulldozers and stuff, and he was there after the dig. And he goes, Denny, what happened to all the excess dirt? And I says, what? He goes, there's no they didn't pack it down that good. What happened? I went back up there and started taking pictures. There's actually several tons of dirt missing on the hillside. It's gone. The hillside's been wiped out. And the road's sunken down. There's actually less dirt than there was when they showed up. So they had to remove something from the ground.
And that's, I'm sorry, that's evidence of a night dig. The back hill is gone. They did that overnight. It was there the day before, it was gone the next day, and they were trying to conceal it by standing shoulder to shoulder, the 60 agents at that time. You guys, I want to say something. You guys have done an amazing job. I haven't quite heard the second section, but the first one was really terrific. And with this interview that you're doing, you're piecing together something very important, what you just summarized to us just now, about the logic here, about digging to a certain depth, stopping. This is all planned out. They had really precise data. Even Denny's calculations, where he was working with me, I was estimating. I didn't tell you this. Let me segue for a second. Denny gave me the size of his targets working with a somewhat off-the-shelf, kind of flimsy resistivity meter, which measures the resistivity or conductivity of the target underground. It's okay, but it's not great. And I even told the FBI in the meeting we had with them, no, you can't rely on this. You have to bring really great equipment. Well, the numbers that were given that Denny was hitting, let's say, with his resistivity pulse of electricity were about 2 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. I think I said that right. 2 by 2 by 3. That's 12 cubic feet. So you can do a calculation on the internet of what 12 cubic feet of gold would weigh. This is really crazy. So that comes to 7 tons, 8 tons, 7, 8 tons, I can't remember. As we approach the day of infamy, whereby the dig happens, they were in touch with us, the FBI, about the results coming back from EnviroScan's reading. Now, there would be 2 things that I wanted to know: the mass, which the gravimeter can estimate of the target, and the density of the target. So he calls us up. He calls me up, and I get Denny on the phone, and it's just the 2 of us. Kem was, I don't know where Kem was at the time, but I'm all ears, and I say, because he's told us he's got the results, and I say, okay, Jake, tell us what you got. What was the density? And I swear to God, he says 19.5. And I literally jump out of my seat and start running around my room, like in my office, like a madman. And he's literally like a madman. Denny will tell you. And then I calmed down, and I got on the phone again, or I started speaking on the phone. I said, I can't believe this. And I said, what's the mass? And he says, remember, he didn't know that I had predicted 7 to 9 tons because of the 12 cubic feet of gold that Denny had potentially imaged. And he says, 8 to 9 tons. Can you believe that? So to your point, they did know how deep it is, because the gravimeter will tell you how deep the target is. Depth, mass, and identity. Really special. If you have an anomaly, like a big volume of gold bars right below your feet, 10 feet, in sandstone, in shale or sandstone, whatever it might be, which is only 2.3 for its reading of density versus 19.5. So it really flared up. Would they really make a mistake like that? I doubt it. So you asked the right question. They knew how far to dig and when to stop.
See, the state DCNR, for the last 2 years we were there working, they allowed us to leave the cave, go up above, and drill down from the top. It was their recommendation to do that. And they came in and showed us how to do the drilling. Well, on the last end of 2 years, 21 holes, I hit the gold at 6 feet 4 inches down from the top. So I told the FBI the gold is 6 feet 4 inches, and I know where the pig iron containers were at. So when they came back up before the dig, we were up there on site. We hooked the equipment up to my proper rods in the ground, and the gold machine just lit up. It just went brilliant. Everybody screaming. And I showed them the hole that I had where I hit the gold, and I said it's 6 feet 4 inches down. Well, when they came in and they dug on day one, they dug 6 feet down. They're within 4 inches of the actual pig iron containers in the gold. They knew exactly, because I drilled into this stuff, had it on my drill bit and stuff, so they knew within inches. It's like Ethan said, these guys knew exactly what they were doing with tape measures and everything. They knew what they were doing.
So Denny has explained that his drilling reading, they stacked potentially empty, like Wells Fargo strong boxes on top of bars. So he would have banged into those at around 6 feet. But my calculations were that the gold itself were 8 to 10 feet down. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
they had,
Yeah.
There you go. So where we are now is frustrated. Yeah, very frustrated, because it's a big truth that needed to come out, and a lot of money is involved. And it's really fascinating, and good science was brought to bear, and big government, didn't do what they said they would do. And some people say you guys are fools for bringing them in, but the only way these bars are going to come out of the ground were, if they were truly U.S. Mint bars, as the story said, would be for the government to come in and bring them out in a partnership, and they just reneged on their side. We feel betrayed about this, and the evidence is very compelling. It's one thing to say nothing was found and that's it, versus all of the facts and data points that we're putting forward that lead to a logical decision. A night dig happens, and they did it at night because that was the only opportunity to do it. That was the plan. They kicked us off, brought us back, and then they couldn't help but small towns have witnesses like Cheryl at the bottom, the cop, the guys who were antler hunting, and the young lady who was bringing her daughter to school and saw the armored cars go by. I mean, this is small town America. They have no vested interest. They had never seen any activity like this before, with all these FBI armored cars, trucks, vehicles, SUVs coming through.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to prove if the FBI did take gold is to go back and do another dig. And if we pull gold out the second time that they left behind and whatnot, that would prove our case.
And when we go back with the group, with any kind of instrumentation to the exact spot they dug, of course there's nothing there. There's no sign at all. Whereas we used a GPR system, which showed a metal mass. You can't tell if it's gold with GPR. We used a deep-seeking metal detector that treasure hunters use. It's called a 2-box. It's called a TM808. That had shown a target. That had sounded off. We used Denny's GPL system, which is not a software system. It sounds off if it hits metal. And if it connected directly to the gold with no air around it, that would be a very strong confirmation because that gold was there. But if it's in a pocket of air, it's iffy. If it was totally accurate, that particular system. And then they brought in a gravimeter. And since the dig, we brought in these conductivity booms. They're these big PVC-type pipes that have sensitive instrumentation on it. And they tell you if there's metal that's conductive underground and roughly what depth it is. And the Schoenstedt utility locator, which is going off saying there's definitely more iron and metal below. Not exactly where the FBI dug, but right in that general area.
I think that pretty well wraps everything up.
Yeah. I have my own theory, but I'm sure you guys have lots of theories. But
Tell us.
So my brain is, I always tell people, which this is a bad start because then people just automatically think it, but I am not a conspiracy theorist whatsoever, but I try to use my brain logically. And I mean, the government has hid stuff in people's sight before, like plain sight. They make you think that's something, and some people know. And the fee that they probably would have paid you guys for a finder fee is probably minute. That my feeling is they did find something, but it's not U.S. Mint, and they technically don't have the rights to it, which is why they're not
Right. 100%.
That would be a lot more believable than saying, yeah, we found nothing, you can't talk about this, goodbye.
Or, I don't know,
I
even
think
make up, like,
Sure.
oh, we found stuff, it was, you know, these containers and this other stuff. I don't know, like,
At least give you something.
a realistic story.
Right.
I believe the saying is common sense isn't so common anymore, and it seems like the FBI in this scenario may fit that role.
If the FBI did this kind of stuff to us, and they forged photographs and papers in the files and stuff, just think what they're doing to other people, like
Right.
Trump or anybody else. Yeah.
And I wasn't really, just in general, I mean, we know people are hiding stuff. They've proven that in history now through prior things that they didn't talk about or we hid something. So what's them to stop that from something on this? I guess that's my thought.
so. Some people will say Occam's razor is in play here, where the simplest theory is the right one. Nothing was found. That's it. Nothing was found. Simple. No, it's much more complicated than that. You have to look at the details. And I urge you to kind of review what I had said at first, as if, an attorney addressing the jury at the first part, which is, we're sure a night dig took place.
Sure.
So if a night dig took place, why would they send armored cars all through the day, morning and night, back to the site? That does not make any logical sense. Why would they prevent people from coming out of their houses when they were coming by? All that stuff. You've got to think about that.
Things like this happened during the Nixon administration. Gold was found out west, and the FBI came in and took it all. And Victoria Peak, it happened again where somebody found it. But see, this is back in the 70s and the late times before cell phones and trail cams and computers. What the FBI wasn't prepared for was somebody like me that would put a whole bunch of trail cams up and use cell phones and stuff. This is a different time and age, and this time pictures were taken and they got caught. Yeah.
Right.
Everything's recorded on a cell phone nowadays, or a camera or something. There's always evidence.
Absolutely, and as Lincoln may have said, it's maybe apocryphal. You can't fool all the people all the time. I mean, they tried. It was military-like operations. They tried to get away with this. Maybe in the end, we were getting hints that more was going on there than meets the eye from them, from even Gates. We never know. But you can't fool all the people all the time in a small hunting village on something like this, right? You just can't.
Right.
Ken, what's your opinion on all this? Do you have anything else to add?
What's my opinion or the ladies?
Kem.
Oh, Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you have anything you want to add to this conversation?
No. I agree with it all. I mean, it's all spot on. And I mean, over the course of 13, 14 years, we had 10, 12, 13 different pieces of metal detecting equipment there, and everything screamed gold, silver, gold in that same area. And for nothing to be found, it's unreal. Something was in that hole, something of precious metal, and we're going to find out what it was.
I hope so.
Crazy, and you want a resolution, like, to be dealing with it for how many years that you guys have. Like, I couldn't imagine that, that feeling of just, you want to find out the truth. It just would drive you crazy.
Yeah, we were lucky. I was able to reach out to Ann Weissman, who's terrific. She's a former Justice Department person herself, and she said this doesn't smell right. She's worked very important FOIA cases. She's basically one of the top FOIA attorneys in the country, a guru by definition, and she's taken on big cases. And she just steadily worked this case for finders keepers and brought out some amazingly good stuff that would have been very hard. And Bill Cluck, the attorney for finders keepers in Pennsylvania, has done tremendous stuff as well. So credit to them. Credit to Denny and Kem for being persistent. It's been a really crazy ride.
See, the reason we're in the court battles, we're trying to get everything figured out how the government works on a find like this, because we have 9 more to dig up. And we probably in another week we'll be starting on our second one.
Yeah.
So we'll give you an update.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We want to keep informed and, keep our listeners informed, because, we're invested in this now. We're on board with you guys. We want to, figure out where this goes. And we really appreciate, all three of you taking the time to sit down and, hash this out with us and, give us your input because, like we said, we've only been doing this reading about this for a couple of weeks now. You guys have, invested years and so much of your time and money into this story. And, we really appreciate your time and, all of your expertise that you've shared with us.
And, that expertise means so much that you guys were talking about has been covered up or not shared.
Right, right.
And that's why we're talking to you, because whatever you put out there is actually going to help our case too.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So,
We hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll look forward to any sort of updates that you guys can toss our way, and we'll be following as much as we can as far as where you guys are at. But yeah, any sort of updates that you have, we would be interested in learning about.
And if there's anything significant that happens, we can get you on again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, cool. Hopefully this stuff was good background for you guys. We really appreciate your time, and thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll look forward to being in
Thank
touch.
you.
All right, guys, and welcome back. So, hope you guys enjoyed that. I mean, we definitely enjoyed getting the chance to sit down and talk with them, get their, personal thoughts and, what they think happened that day and their theories in the background and their expertise.
Mhm. Yeah, it was good and it was interesting and it was exciting to hear from them instead of us trying to dig through the story. It was just nice to hear from the people who lived through it and
are still living through it.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Yep, still living through it.
Yeah, so if we ever get any updates from them, we hope to pass them along as little tidbits to you guys, and
maybe throw them in an episode, or maybe there'll be enough that it'll be a whole episode here.
You never know. Depends on what's going on, I suppose.
Yep.
And then as another little tidbit that we have for you guys, we actually got an email from a listener. We won't use full names, but we had Carl reach out to us, and his background is an electrical engineer who also designs metal detectors and other treasure hunting equipment for a living. So we did get his personal thoughts on the episode as well.
So he widely, this is Meg chiming in, the researcher, he widely feels that the story is a fabrication, which, I think we can say, we've said from day one.
Who knows?
Just taking this face value for what we can dig up today.
We're just the researcher giving you the information that's out there.
The people giving you, what our perspective is.
Right.
Right.
We have never, stated that we thought this was 100% true, and largely stated that one of the biggest issues with this entire story was that, many believe it's a fabrication and that it has little to no evidence for its truth.
Right. We definitely started off with a lot more skepticism, I think.
Sure. I don't think I always assumed that. I always had some skepticism, but my thought was, okay, if I approached it with if there was something there, what do I think happened with it? And now my opinion has changed a little bit, but I am more of okay, it seems that there may be something there, but what? Was it gold? Was it something else? Was it a giant waste of the FBI's time to come out?
But again, it's all up to interpretation. We weren't personally there. We don't know 100% what happened, but this was the information that we were able to find, and thankfully, we got more information from people who were there, and everybody can draw their own conclusion, but
we got info from Finders Keepers and info from Carl, so it's a lot out there.
Well, and I think a big part of it though is, so Finders Keepers did their stuff, but then the FBI also did theirs. That's a key point in this is Finders Keepers, that's who we spoke with. But you also have to take, even if you think what they said isn't 100% factual, you also have to look at it. The FBI had to get a warrant to be able to dig. That requires, the need for factual evidence to be able to go out there and dig. The FBI does their own investigation, their own search with their own equipment, everything like that. So, I mean, if we were just taking this that based solely on what Finders Keepers said, I feel like you could maybe take it more as maybe there is something there, maybe not. But I feel like having the FBI involved puts a little more, I don't want to say truth or fact, but it just gives it a little more validity to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
My final wrap up after hearing what Dennis and Warren and Kem had to say, and then also what Carl had to say. But my thought is, I kind of concluded to myself on this, that one, the FBI did get involved. It's on record, like that. Anybody can find that. Two, I don't think they just come out for anything. Like, I don't think I could just call and be like, hey, I think there's a large amount of gold here in my backyard. I'm not saying that, that's the information they took to them, but
But
I
there
don't
has
think
to be enough information given to them.
That was my point, is they're not just going to come out.
And clearly they had enough information, they had enough from their own scans and things like that to actually bring machinery out and dig.
Right.
So that was one of the criticisms Carl had. He stated that the equipment used by Finders Keepers was not adequate to basically discover what they said they were discovering.
Mm-hmm.
But everything I have found 100% says that the FBI did their own studies.
Right.
In addition to what, they received from Finders Keepers.
Right.
Sure.
They went out with their own.
So if they went out, like they had all this information, they thought something was there, they went out, did their own scans. It's possible that they wouldn't have dug.
Right. And Carl also stated that he feels that basically this was one agent who got kind of hyped up and initiated
ran with it. Yeah.
But I know our government's not perfect in a lot of ways, but I would
hope that it would take more than one agent.
Yeah, I cannot see an entire force.
Like that had to be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And just that there's no way that I think anyone would go to literally go to court to get a warrant based on the word from one FBI agent.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
Now, is it possible? Maybe.
Well,
you never know.
Is it possible that the FBI found, something that wasn't of value and they are quote unquote embarrassed and don't want to then relay that? Sure. But then why, either way, why go through all this hassle?
Right.
Whether there was something there or not. People are obviously going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So just instead of dragging it out, just tell us whether there was something there or not.
Yeah. Again,
or what was there.
I see Carl's point. Maybe some crazy person at the I shouldn't say crazy person, but some guy, some treasure hunter at the FBI that
we're not offending
wants
anybody
to
at
be
the
next, National Treasure real life movie or whatever. Thought, hey, this seems like a great story. We should run with it. Sure, I could see that being people are nuts when it comes to that, and maybe they tried to make big enough case, and maybe that's why.
Watching some of the shows where they do treasure hunting, it's intriguing. It draws people in. You want to see people find these ginormous loads of gold and jewels that were buried from decades ago, and it's going to be awesome. But
my ultimate, I think, again, I see where Carl was coming from because I could see that. For me, I think it's the FBI doesn't come out for nothing.
Right.
If it was a mistake on one guy getting gold hungry, I feel like that was in the FBI. The rest of the FBI would have come out and said, yeah, we found nothing. This guy thought there was something there.
They would have thrown the one guy under the bus.
There was nothing there. Here's all the documents, that we had, and sorry we wasted your time and ours.
I don't even think it would have gotten that far.
Right, but I think
they did their own scans. They saw clearly something there that was worthy of their time to dig.
And that's documented that they did their own scans.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that you have to dig for to find out.
And again, so you dug a hole, and I don't dig holes, so Ethan, you can chime in. You dig a hole, you have the leftover dirt, you put the dirt back on. It's equal mass. You took out what you're putting back.
So that was
that would fill in the hole,
that
right?
Carl was critical of
to the whole, like what we said about the dirt and then the witnesses, but like in talking to like people who actually, I mean, you've done landscaping. Like it would actually probably be even higher than it was if you put the same amount back because it's not packed down.
Right? Is that right?
I mean, so a couple things. Like, yes, in theory, if it wasn't as tightly packed, it would be a little higher. But also, in theory, if they didn't scoop all of the dirt they took out and put it all back, it's going to be a little lower. So I could see, but the size of the hole that
But if they replace all the dirt that they dug out, it should fill the hole, right?
Right. Yeah. Correct. Yes. It shouldn't be higher or lower. It should, in theory, be very close to where it was. Now, the photo that they show of the hole after, they either missed a large amount of dirt putting it back in, or
took something out.
That, yes, like I've seen that photo, and it is obvious, like that's not just dirt settling back in. That's either they didn't put it all back in that they took out, or there was something in there, and that's the difference from what was in there to what they put back.
Right, and that's another point that Carl was trying to argue, that there isn't a hole there, but there are actually, I've seen photos of the hole that's there. That's the dip in the ground.
Well, maybe there's not a hole there now. Like, you can always take more fill, I guess, and fill it so it's not like a huge danger or liability to have a huge hole in the ground.
But witnesses who have been interviewed even since that live in that area state that there's still a depression, a large depression there.
Okay.
And you can go and see it. We could go hike and see it if we wanted to, based on, you know, what witnesses who live there say. And that's another thing. He said that the witness statements weren't, they didn't really know what they were hearing, but we're not just talking about people hearing things.
Right.
People visually saw armored trucks leaving. People visually saw the dump trucks and the backhoe and the things in the middle of the night coming and going.
Right. So, well, and even if they were told, I think Dennis said something about they weren't allowed to come outside at one point.
Yep.
You can still look out your windows. Like, just because you're not allowed to, like, physically come out and see, like, if you see something driving past your house, you're still going to see that, whether you're inside or outside. Like, you have a window.
Another thing he said was talking about the tunneling system and just how realistic is that. And I get
By the way, that sounds so terrifying. I still can't, like, think about that. Like, their description just has me horrified.
So, and I get that, but, like, and how far-fetched some of that seems. But I actually, I'm guessing if they were doing that, they weren't just digging new tunnels. Like, they're using existing mines. So, and his argument was that it wasn't in coal country, but the Quijano region is filled with coal mines.
Right.
Abandoned coal mines. I went on to
the
government site and actually looked at maps of abandoned coal mines, and they have them all through that region. Now, there isn't as much out in Erie. The closest ones I saw were like Erie Erie State Park and kind of like Warren, Pennsylvania area. But the other thing that whole area of Erie has that I didn't know until I started looking are gemstone mines, specifically garnet at that time. And when you look at how the coal mines and the gemstone mines that are abandoned overlap, they like touch in places.
Okay.
So, like, I mean, I'm not a miner. I don't have an expertise in this, but like,
and again, this is all just our theories.
Right. To me, like, it's like, okay, so, and let me also add, because, I love history, and I also, am an artist, and, took 7 years of French. The catacombs. Underneath the city of Paris. So one of the things Carl said is that from Erie to the Quijano region to Dents Run would be about 80 miles. The catacombs under the city of Paris were all developed by connecting abandoned, what they called Paris stone. It was a special type of limestone mines, all under the city of Paris. It's 180 miles. Now it's all filled with skeletons. but 180 miles.
Right.
So it can be done.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying it was.
Right.
I'm just saying it can be.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think our history is full of, like, horrible stories of things that are done in prisoner of war camps. I mean...
Oh, for sure.
So, you know, you get enough bodies in there. Like, who knows?
Right.
So I don't, like, I'm not saying that it's factual. I'm just saying I think it could be
plausible.
done. It's plausible.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, I looked into that. So,
I mean, I hope that we presented you guys with enough of the information to make your own choice about what you think
and
happened.
what's currently going on.
And again, we don't know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's only our personal theories. I think you're kind of more of... You seem a little more of a skeptic, I think, than...
I don't know that I'm a skeptic. I think what changed it for me is, it doesn't matter what you think, but the government, like, I don't care who you are, they do shady things. And anytime they don't want to release documents on something,
it seems even more shady.
It
like,
immediately
why
throws a red flag to me that you're not being truthful.
Yeah.
So just for them to say, hey, nope, we didn't find anything.
We're not going to provide you with the documents that you're asking for.
Right.
We're going to keep dragging this out. We're not going to give you the information.
Right.
You can't come up here. You have to
Correct.
sit down and
that just
in your
seems
vehicles. Like,
that just seems to me like we found something, and it's obvious we found something, but we're not going to tell you we found something or show you that we found something. And that's what always throws me off. If the FBI came out and said, hey, we didn't find anything, here is all of our documentation, and yeah, we dug at night, sorry, like, we told you we wouldn't, but we decided to, but here's all the photos, then obviously they have nothing to hide.
Or like, hey, we found something, you know, it was something military that we, I mean, you think of the only other thing that has the composition of gold is tungsten, which goes into electrodes and all that. Like, maybe something was there and they just couldn't have the public knowing about it. So just say, hey, this is what we found. We can't have this widely known. Sorry.
And the only other thing I think too is I do think they found something, and do I think it was gold? I don't know if it was gold, but it must have been.
That's kind of where I'm at too. I think there was something there.
If I
understood Warren and Dennis, if it was state or federal owned, they only have a percentage. I'm trying to remember.
So
they only get a
federal, or if it was state owned. So if it was federal gold, it belongs to the government.
It belongs to the government, and then the FBI has nothing. In my opinion, the FBI has nothing to hide because it's theirs, and finders keepers is getting a percentage.
If it was foreign gold coming from Great Britain or France to support the Confederate Army and being tunneled through, which is the theory that you know, I think it seems like Warren and Dennis feel is probably more plausible. Then it belongs to the state and who found it. So they have something to lose there. So another interesting thing, and I'm going to allow this to just kind of, I mean, we can put this on, but I kind of feel like, yes, they are working on, you know, writing a book, understandably, and things like that. But Dennis and Warren both sent over documentation showing the military, it's from the U.S. Military Archives, showing the military cards for the individuals in the story.
But we're not going to go into that more than that. We want. I mean, we don't want to step on their toes.
And also documentation of the inquest.
Into
the aftermath of all of this with Congress. So
at least we know more that the story that we originally told in like episode 1 has a lot more backing than what we thought.
I mean, yes, over the years it could have gained a whole different life.
Sure.
But there's truth to it. There's a foundation and some truth to this story. So, you know, I found that really interesting too.
And we'll see if anything happens here in the future, and maybe we'll just put it all to rest one way or the other.
I sure hope so.
It's interesting.
I feel like most people are going to think that there was something there. That's my gut. There's at least something there.
I mean, I am pretty skeptical when it comes to this kind of stuff, and it's like, I don't really know what I think. Like, But
if I was just taking the word, not that I don't believe Dennis and Warren and Kem, it's not that I wouldn't put all of my faith in them, but it's not just them.
It's that the FBI
They had to go to court.
right.
The FBI had to go out. Like, there's something more.
Right, and they're right, and just in what finders keepers think. I mean, they're going to court for this.
Right.
They must feel there's something there. They're not going to waste
Well, yeah,
money
they
if they're like,
invested
hey,
so much time and effort into this.
And money into it to try to, so that, I want to believe there's something there, but
right.
We'll
hopefully we'll find out what it is, but we may not.
Yeah, and maybe it was just, as they say, a boogeyman story, and finders keepers finds it out. But hey, they've found cool locations in the past, so I suspect this will be another one.
So you think there's something there? I think there's something there. What do you think, Meg?
I think there was something there. Yeah. Whether it was gold or not, I can't be sure.
Right.
But there was something, because even the worst, organized governments do not jump through that many hoops to do a dig for nothing.
Right.
And go on and do this whole lawsuit when it literally was nothing. They could just say, here,
hand it over and be done.
This is proof, and not waste,
more time and resources and money into trying to cover it up.
Yep.
Right.
If the FBI, like I said, if the FBI wasn't involved in the way they were involved and not releasing the things they were releasing, I would say, hey, it's a cool history find, but probably nothing there.
Like, if it was a mistake, like Carl feels it was, I just don't think that any governmental organization would waste this much time and resources to save a little bit of embarrassment.
Right.
I really don't. For one person, if it was one person,
I just never know with their government. Like, I feel like the government does some weird things in general.
There would be
but I feel like it's going to be worse the longer they drag it out. If it just never happened, they'd just be like, oh, shoot, sorry.
Which goes back to my point.
Here's our documentation that nothing happened. Like,
I'm
there
just
was
being devil's
advocate.
That's my ultimate thought is, if they would have just released all the information, I would be like, yeah, this is...
Right.
Okay, there was nothing there. They wasted their time. Darn, but move on. And now it's just more irritating to me that they're not releasing the information.
And honestly, if it was the word of one person, it was this big oops. There are a million ways you can throw that person under the bus.
Right. And they wouldn't blink at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
we fired this guy because he was a fool.
Right. I don't know. Well, as always, guys, if you have your opinions or thoughts, definitely send them our way.
Yeah, we appreciate.
What's our email address for this, Meg? You think I'd know it by now?
info@shollyeagency.com, and that's SHOLLEY. Or you can look us up at shollyeagency.com.
This is why Meg is our marketing director.
Hit contact and just send a note. It goes to me or one of the owners. So
they'll pass it our way. And we love to hear from you guys. We love your opinions. We love your thoughts.
Yeah.
And as always, if you have any other stories that you think we should cover or, whatever, definitely shoot them our way. Anybody else have any lasting thoughts?
Nope.
And we just want to thank Dennis and Warren and Kem again for joining us on this podcast and sharing, their thoughts and opinions. So stay tuned, guys. Thank you.
If you liked what you heard in this episode, be sure to follow Pennsylvania Life, Legends, and Lore on your preferred podcast platform to stay up to date on new content. Pennsylvania Life, Legends, and Lore is produced by Harv Productions, LLC.